Hello everyone, and welcome to Afterimage 100% Run. Because this guide is no commentary, but I have a lot to say, I'm going to do all my talking up front in this intro video. My name is Azuark, and I am a low-tier speedrunner who specializes in the longer categories of Afterimage, which makes me the perfect person to do a 100% guide. Sadly, after 2 years, nobody's made a decent walkthrough, so I'm doing my civic duty. First off, if you're here, presumably you know what Afterimage is, but you might not appreciate the scope of the game. Afterimage is the largest Metroidvania on the market, rivaled only by Eterna Noctis, which I haven't played. Its game world is definitely larger than Hollow Knight's, and so if you're going to play Afterimage, you have to be ready for a pretty solid commitment. There are 10 endings to the game, and the first of those can be reached without touching over half the game, but if you want to full clear the game, my guide is 12 hours long, and that's with me knowing where to go and how to fight the bosses. If you're new to the game, even if you follow directly along with the guide, you should expect to need at least 20 hours. Without any guide at all, I would expect it to be roughly double that. As you can see, one of the biggest assets of this guide is that I did make maps you can follow along with, even if you don't want to watch the entire video. Please note that these maps were created by drawing on top of renowned Metroidvania cartographer Demigen's original. I don't ask for donations or have any way for you to contribute, but Demigen is a treasure to the community and he provides more resources than just the map. If you appreciate this guide, please go drop $1 for the high-resolution version of his world map. He also houses a number of spreadsheets listing things like where all the drops in the game are. There's a link to his page in the video description below. Regarding Afterimage itself, I've tried to design the guide in such a way that if you're aiming for the platinum, you'll be nearly there by the time you finish the guide. There's a few achievements you'll have to go out of your way for, but there's a few that I make a point to steer you toward completing. The game expects you to reach level 99 for achievement purposes, and I finished at about 75. Outside of that grind and the fact that some enemies have random item drops you'll need to collect, there's only a few specific tasks left to complete. In the 13th and final part of the guide, I do address achievement completion, but along the way, the moral of the story is try to kill all the enemies as you go and pick up everything they drop. More on that in a minute. And I'll talk more about mechanics too in a second, but first. This guide is also perfectly usable as a Let's Play for anyone who wants to just experience the game. I've deliberately let all the cutscenes play in my footage. Also, I will occasionally add some notes on the screen to help explain the story a bit, because if Afterimage has a weak point, it's the way the story is presented. It has an inconvenient framing device, it hides a lot of story in the item descriptions and subtle background clues, and it suffers some translation issues from the original Chinese. I mostly limit these remarks to when story segments are playing. However, I do have other remarks on screen at times. Because I play an ultra-wide, which is not YouTube's native format, I have space at the bottom of the screen. So on one end, I have Live Split running with my notes on what to grab next, and in the rest of the empty area, I'll sometimes add some visual comments such as tips for how to fight a boss, or how to perform a tricky maneuver. That said, although I am a speedrunner, I am not a particularly accomplished speedrunner. There's no tech that's going to be absolutely required, and I've tried to make the guide friendly to new players. We aren't rushing any high-level bosses or areas, and the few times we head into tricky areas, it was a very carefully considered decision that I will also warn you of. You are welcome to deviate from the guide however you see fit, but I tried to make things feel natural by clearing the areas we're in, even if it made more sense to wait until we had a double jump or a wall climb or whatever. If there's something I do that you want to skip for now, there's also a comprehensive map marker system that I advise taking advantage of. On the note of preferences, Afterimage has 6 weapon types, each with upgrades all throughout your journey. You can equip 2 different weapons, even though you'll probably use one almost all the time. In the videos, you will see me use Katana and Scythe, and as a result, I will make a few comments on the best upgrades for those if you're using them. But by all means, use twin daggers, whips, swords, or greatswords instead. Experiment. Have fun. If you're the type who likes parrying, you want to use greatswords. I barely ever use weapon skills and I seldom cast magic, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. You'll get armor and accessories too, which provide stat boosts, as well as a small collection of charms called Afterimages. I encourage you to try whatever setups you like. Finally, there's a talent tree. It spiders off in 8 directions, looking at first like it might be a Path of Exile style sequence of nodes that's going to overwhelm you, but it's pretty basic. The top is defense, the bottom is magic, the 6 arms on the left and right are each for a specific weapon type, and you can completely ignore the 4 that you aren't using. Oh, and there's also potions and other consumables, but you'll literally never see me use one. The item inventory is a little clunky to navigate, and I'll mostly only go into it to use any new foods we've cooked, since those give a permanent stat boost the first time you eat one. Because Afterimage's world is so large, there are 2 ways to get around. One is to approach a confluence. Those are the big white trees that double as save points. There's one in every map area except Frozen Veins. At the tree, you can warp to any other confluence you've visited. There's also smaller white trees that function as save points, but not warp waypoints. However, you will have an inventory item called a resting potion, which will allow you to instantly teleport to any save point you've stopped at. This is a consumable, so I don't use this routinely, but there are times when it's much more convenient. You can buy more resting potions from the first vendor in town, so feel free to use them exclusively if you like. The warping feature was added later, and initially the developers expected you to only use resting potions. There's a lot of other quality of life features that were also added post-release, so if you're looking at some of the reviews from launch, that would be why people are complaining about some things that you have no trouble with. Anyway, my last objective here is going to be to quickly run through all the achievements that are not literally a part of finishing the game. I'll be skipping anything that involves killing a boss or finishing an ending. First, there are a few achievements for picking up all the stuff on the ground. These should also be accomplished just by finishing the guide. If you miss anything, make sure you pick up the Treasure Scope of Sa from the fairy Sa in Halcyon Veins to help you locate whatever you've missed. Keen Hunter requires you to complete the bestiary, which is a fancy way of saying you have to kill one of every monster. Some of them don't happen in very many places, and you'll want to collect rare drops and level to 99 anyway, so you should try to avoid skipping enemies. Epicure and Taste of Happiness ask you to eat one of every food. There is a cooking vendor in the first town, and once you complete her quest, 3 new quest NPCs appear elsewhere, who also offer to cook things for you in exchange for ingredients. I addressed this in a late stage of the guide, but you will need the drops or you may have to go farming. Money for Nothing wants you to purchase all shop items. There are, I believe, 5 merchants in the game. 3 can be found in town. The other 2 are Stanley in Town of the Exiled and the ferryman that connects the various fire zones. Arguably, the fairy Sa is also a merchant, but I don't know if she counts towards this achievement. To unlock the achievement, though, you'll need to buy out anything that has limited stock, and then you need to purchase one of everything that doesn't have limited stock. I recommend avoiding the unlimited items until you're in a position to grab everything the vendor offers so that you can easily track what you have and haven't bought. Geographer is an achievement I've had some issues with. It requires you to save at every save point. There are a few easy to miss trees, like the one you respawn at in the very beginning of the game. It's tempting to assume that because you return from this spot that you don't need to also manually save at it, and you would be incorrect. Most trees can be easily spotted from the map, but there are a few areas that don't appear on the map, like the Hidden Base and Negredo Tower. Despite being extra careful to stop at every tree, I was not awarded this achievement during the run, so I'm going to need to do some research to determine what I'm missing. Tis Ain't Pogo Time, The Number of the Beast, and Iron Man are all asking you to perform specific actions. One requires use of a greatsword, one requires equipping a hidden item and then bouncing on enemy heads 5 times, and getting a setup to deal exactly 666 damage is tricky, but I'll offer my thoughts on that in the final part of the guide. Gate of Babylon and Sa's Apprentice might be the 2 most annoying achievements because they require you to track down every piece of equipment. This doesn't sound so bad until you consider that many enemies have rare drops that can only be acquired by RNG. So if you're unlucky, you might be farming for a while. I will go over where all these items are in the final leg of the guide. And finally, you need to reach level 99 and max out the talent tree. Like any game with a leveling system, you'll gain levels quickly at first and then it'll slow down. When I completed my 12-hour run for the guide, I was level 75 without making any special effort to grind. Gaining a level adds a very small amount to your stats, but it also adds another talent point for the tree, so reaching level 99 is doing double duty. However, one thing I do want to describe because it may influence your run is how the experience system in Afterimage works. When you kill an enemy, you get experience points, but the amount you receive is based not only on the enemy's level, but also on yours. There's an area of the game you'll retrace 5 or 6 times throughout the run that has enemies that are large floating books. They're about level 50 and can give you a maximum of about 2000 XP. However, as a speedrunner, when I get to that area for the first time, with how under-leveled I am when I reach that section, they award 12. Each time I return to the area over the course of the run, they're worth a bit more, until finally they're giving their max. Given that you will have to eventually grind enemies for experience anyway, it makes sense that you would want to avoid being capped on what you can earn from your kills. So it's strongly encouraged that you don't necessarily grind, but that you do try to make sure you're the appropriate level for when you're in a given area. The routing on the guide will help with that, but it wouldn't even be a stupid idea to run through each area twice, just to give yourself an extra chance to get the drops in an area. Or look up which enemies drop unique items and farm those until you get what you came for. I think that's just about everything, but please don't hesitate to drop a question or comment below, or swing by the Afterimage Discord. And if you like the game when you're done and have any interest, the speedrunners for the game are all cool people, much cooler than me, and they love to help people get started. Speaking of getting started, it's time that we get started, so I thank you for your patience in listening to me, and now on to the guide.